Welcome back to the Death Row and Executions channel. I am Paco Rivera. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more Death Row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. As I said last week, there are two executions scheduled for November the 16th. One is David Santiago Renteria in Texas. That case was already presented last week and appears on this channel. The other execution is that of Casey McWhorter in Alabama, which is the case that I will be discussing today. Casey Allen McWhorter was 18 years old when he committed the crime that he has been convicted and sentenced to death for. He had 3 accomplices that were younger than him. And one of those accomplices was the 15-year-old son of the victim, Edward Lee Williams, who was robbed and killed in 1993. 4 teenagers in total had conspired to rob and kill the father of that 15-year-old. Because 3 of the group were minors at the time of the crime, they were spared the death penalty. The 15-year-old son of Edward Lee Williams was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Casey McWhorter, however, at age 18 and the oldest of the group, was old enough to be sentenced to death. Records indicate that the group had begun conspiring to rob and kill Edward Lee Williams about 3 weeks before that fatal day. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on February 18, 1993, the son of Edward Williams and another friend who stayed in the car dropped off Casey McWhorter and a 16-year-old at the home of Edward Lee Williams while nobody was home. McWhorter and the 16-year-old entered the house and proceeded to gather items of value from the home. They also searched for what they believed was a large stash of money that Edward Williams' 15-year-old son had told them his father was surely hiding somewhere in the house. McWhorter and the 16-year-old were unable to find a safe or that large stash of money. The two did find some guns, some rifles, and the plan was to wait for Edward Williams to arrive at the house and get him to turn over the cash. While they waited, they had taken the time to produce some homemade makeshift silencers for the rifles using some milk containers stuffed with napkins. A strong indication that they had no intention of leaving Edward Williams alive. McWhorter and his friend also test-fired the rifles with the silencers by shooting into a mattress on a bed in the home. One report states that Edward Williams was shot by Casey McWhorter as soon as the homeowner came through the door. Both McWhorter and his friend then shot him at least 10 more times, with McWhorter shooting a final and fatal shot into Williams' head as he lay helpless on the floor. In other reports, it states that the 2 men would later say that after Williams arrived at the house, he immediately put up a struggle and tried to wrestle the rifle away from one of them, and they were forced to shoot to protect themselves from being shot if Williams ended up with the rifle. The second report would make more sense, as one may safely assume that the 2 young men, after waiting all those hours in the house, would first try to force Edward Williams to turn over the money that was hiding before shooting him as soon as he walked through the door. But that attempt failed when Williams may have decided instead to put up a fight. The 2 young men then gathered all the items that they had collected, along with a wallet that was removed from the dead man's pocket, and left the house, driving away in Edward Williams' pickup truck. They drove to a prearranged spot in a wooded area to meet up with the other 2 conspirators, and once there, the 4 of them divided the money and items taken from the house. They also stripped the pickup truck to sell its parts. It was reported that Casey McWhorter was very angry with the victim's son because the money he was saying was at the house was not found. That same day, almost immediately after the four had gathered. One of the three minors, maybe his conscience getting the better of him, went to the police station and reported the crime and everything that happened. On the following day, everyone, including Casey McWhorter, were arrested. Now, here is where things get a bit strange. On that day that the arrests were made, just prior to the arrests, Casey McWhorter reportedly had ingested a whole bunch of pills and alcohol in an attempt to commit suicide. He was taken to Boaz Albertville Hospital, and there is where he was arrested. When McWhorter was questioned, he gave a full confession. Only McWhorter, as a legal adult, was convicted of a capital crime and sentenced to death. The son of the victim, who was 15 years old and not present at the house when the murder occurred, is currently serving a life sentence in Alabama without the possibility of parole. The other two minors accepted plea deals, though details of the penalties they received are not seen in reports that I researched. Please remember to subscribe for more death row and upcoming execution stories. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more death row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. I'm Paco Rivera. Bye for now.